Tomorrow, India's largest platform for entrepreneurs. I'm Sunanda Jaiseal, and if it matters to you, it matters to us. All of this week here on the show, we are doing a special focus around education. What has changed? Why has it changed? And what can you, as a student, as an entrepreneur, look forward to? And why you should be keeping an eye on some of the trends that we're seeing here in the space of education. Tonight on the show, I would love to welcome in someone who's known to speak his mind, someone who needs no introduction, the chairman of Manipal Global Education, Mohandas Pai. Mr. Pai, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, speaking with students, speaking with students who are aspiring to become entrepreneurs, and speaking with entrepreneurs who are perhaps looking at the education space to say, where are the opportunities for someone like myself, and to really talk about what the pandemic has meant for them, what the pandemic has meant for the education space, and also looking ahead to what changes we can see perhaps in the education space.
Okay, thank you
for joining us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow Icons. And before we get into the details, the first thing I want to understand from you in this past year and a half, what are the changes that you have seen both personally and at Manipal that you perhaps want to talk to us about?
Sunanda, let me say this, that COVID was an inflection point for the country, something that we have not seen for 100 years, you know that. And coming close to the 75th year of our freedom, it was a very, very big change. First, there was a palpable fear of the pandemic when we went in for the first lockdown. We had a massive lockdown all across the country, barring the rural areas. The cities were all shut. The semi-urban areas were shut. And I think that is something that happened in a very big way. And my personal view is it has caused lasting damage to education and to society. Now, we have three sets of people in society: the urban, educated, semi-educated, middle class, and lower middle class. There are people in the smaller towns and the people in the deep rural areas who don't have access to much. Now, as far as the urban crowd was concerned, most of them transition to a digital way of education, to a digital way of living almost immediately. You must be knowing that India has 1.2 billion mobile connections, 900 million mobile phones, 650 million people are on the internet. And they are largely in the urban, semi-urban areas, those transition. But in the urban areas, the poorer people who are staying in smaller houses, maybe in the slums, the government school, they were not able to transition. So maybe 30% of India transition, the balance could not transition, maybe 10% did. And in the middle tier, in the smaller towns and rural areas, it was, maybe 10, 15%. And in the, interiors, it was almost non-existent because there were no teachers, the teachers were not trained, etc. The students are lost close to 2 years. And all reports say that people in school who could not get education are going back because, they maybe forget what they learned or whatever it is. And it's been a very traumatic experience for everybody. So you must remember that if your mother is educated, your mother can teach you and go through the classes and keep the memory of teaching alive. But a mother is not educated, which is there for maybe 30, 40% of a student population, then, it's very difficult for you to come back. So I think it's been traumatic. It has been hit many people very badly, and we have to recover out of that. But there has been a dramatic transformation in the habits of people for maybe 50, 60% of people. All of us have gone to the digital era, the digital revolution is before us, and we have a very exciting time ahead. The key challenge is, how do you ensure that this becomes a permanent part of what we do in future in education? Second, how do you empower every single child in India as part of this entire digital platform as early as possible so they too can participate and they can come up?
Since you're talking digital, I very briefly want to read out some figures. I'm sure you're aware of these figures, but for the benefit of our viewers, India's consumer digital economy slated to touch $800 billion by 2030, of which 60% being contributed by travel and just about 30% by education. So my question to you, Mr. Pai, how do we see, even as we're talking about the benefits and the opportunities for digital in education, how do you ensure it becomes much more, because the potential in the market is clearly huge?
First of all, you must understand that there are private schools and public schools. Maybe 50% of young people, 50% of our students get educated in private schools, 50% in public schools. And even the public schools, maybe 60% of that, the 30% of the whole, have got reasonable good infrastructure. The balance are smaller schools. So to me, government must take care of every child in class from class 6 onwards by giving the child a tablet with rich multimedia video content in languages they understand, including English, so that they have access to this as the first step. So they will not miss out, and they'll have access because Wi-Fi is there in 95, 96% of the country, and they can talk to the big Wi-Fi providers to give a cheap Wi-Fi plan for this, and that's not difficult. The second thing is they must have a mass training of teachers, and many teachers have been trained, yes. But government school, many governments have done that. They had a mass training, and I think that can be done. And the third thing is connect all villages. For example, we have 600,000 villages, maybe 100,000 villages don't have many people. 500,000 villages have to be connected. About 200,000 villages have been connected. We must do it in the next 1 year. We have everything to do. The money is there, everything to do. And this can be done in the next 2 years. Now, suppose you have 226 crore young people in school up to class 12. Assume that 50%, maybe 13 crore are in government schools and they require help. Out of which you can leave out maybe 6 crores or 6.5 crores. Let's assume 7 crore are in class 6 and above. Okay? Now, 7 crore tablets at 10,000 rupees per tablet. If you buy 7 crore, the 70 million, that could be 70,000 crores, maybe 100,000 crores. Government of India can spend 50,000 crores. State governments can spend 50,000 crores. And there's money in the Universal Service Obligation Fund, which is collected from the telecom companies to improve telephony and telephone connections all across India. They got surplus money. The government requires imagination to do all this, float a tender, and this can be a big Make in India project for electronics under PLI. So everything can be tied in together.
Fair point, Mr. Pai, but I want to read another point of data. I'm sure you've had the chance to see this previously, but 88% of that $800 billion figure that I just spoke to you, I understand is coming from shoppers who are based outside of the metros, who are based in tier 2 cities and beyond. If you can be shopping online, I'm sure that you have the facility to ensure that your children are, getting the best of education online as well. What's holding them back then?
See, what is holding them back is their attitude and their allocation, right? Now, they want to shop, they want to buy stuff. Possibly the men in the family want to do that. They want entertainment. And you find people who are seeing movies and downloading movies will be a very large number. But how many of them are going to spend on children's education? They will not spend on children's education. If they spend on children's education, sacrifice much like our parents did maybe a generation ago, India would have been a different country, right? There's large indifference to education in many parts of rural India. And I think that's troublesome. That's why government has to do it. And I would urge government to do it. And I would urge people like the Azim Premji Foundation, who've got maybe $20 billion of funds in them, to partner with government. If you take the top 10 philanthropy enterprises of this country, starting from Reliance, going on to Vedanta, going on to Premji, maybe Infosys and others, they can certainly hope to spend 10, 15,000 crores a year on this endeavor. See, we require action as a country. We have 65 billionaires. Why can't they spend 1 or 2% of the billions on education as a one-time expenditure to get these children up? We can't have a large part of a rural population and children being left behind, because after 10 years, they're going to be in the workforce. So I think it's a very big danger. Sadly, government of India has not done much. They've done some periphery things because they have been focused on giving you rice and a little bit of money on livelihood, keeping the body and soul together. The state governments have been very different. As a country, we must come together, give them access. That is the promise of Digital India made by a prime minister 6 years ago. And it must be done. Studies
show that nearly 40 to 50% of students who've been surveyed across multiple, surveys are saying that they haven't really learned much when it comes to having studied online during the pandemic. Do you think this is necessarily because of the way digital is being done in India, or do you think teachers maybe need to be trained differently? Where is the problem in your mind?
I think it's a multitude of problems because you're newly introduced to a media, and that media is new to you, and the background is new to you. You're not up to the standard where you can use the media. It is very strange to you. You're going to be hurt. Second, in a house, if your parents and others don't understand it, they're not going to be explained some things, you're going to be hurt. And the third, most of the software is done for a urban audience. Look at all the education software. It is not built for rural schools for the way that some of these kids think and behave or they're used to. It's very different. It's very new to them, right? It takes time to settle down. And you require human intervention to train them, to give them all that. You just cannot tell a child who's in a rural school learning in the vernacular, hey, here is something, have a look at it and learn. It'll be very strange for them. It will not go inside the head because they are not up to that mark, possibly, because they're not being exposed. They're very smart. Everybody is smart. Let's understand that. They're not being exposed. They don't understand. It takes time. If they have difficulty, where do they go? And if things don't happen and the technology sometimes does not work, they give up. So it's a large challenge which can be done only by human intervention. So the teachers are required. The parents have to take shape. Only then I think it'll happen.
I want to refer back to some comments that you made a few months ago on the Right to Education Act, sir. And there you have spoken about curriculum rationalization. What do you mean by that? How does it need to be rationalized in keeping with all the changes we're seeing?
Sunanda, let us understand one thing today. The education today, system today is education 2.0, the result of the Industrial Revolution. Before that, we had the Gurukula system in India, the academy in Greece, where you went to a teacher's residence and the teacher taught you, etc. It was one-on-one. It was very different. Then you had mass education. In mass education, you have a teacher who's read the books, you come to a class, they come and lecture, they give you homework, they do all kind of things, you memorize, you get a piece of paper, you get a degree, and then you're out. And that's what happens in school and college. Because that information was in books. Now, all that information is there on Google, is there on internet. You don't have to mug it up. You don't have to put it inside your hard disk. All you need to do is learn how to search and how to find out, right? But you need to be taught how to use that data, how to use that. So the curriculum is information rich, knowledge rich, much of it not necessary, much of it old, and much of it you can discover. So reduce the content by 35-40%. Increase the project work where students sit down, search, and come out and write some project, think and analyze and discuss. So the teacher and the students have a greater interaction and they talk much more and understand how to solve problems rather than cramming them information. Now, that is why the curriculum has to be shortened. So it's got to be modernized. And I think it has got to be cut short. So students have more time to think and they, through a digital device, they can get access to the information at home and they can learn the art of reading.
Mr. Pai, I have to take a quick break. On that note, we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. That's here on Leaders of Tomorrow. And today, our icon is Mohandas Pai. There is also another aspect of digital learning that I would love to discuss with you, and that is the emotional disconnect. You were saying there's a multitude of reasons why perhaps students are not learning, particularly at primary levels when younger children tend to learn more perhaps from their peers and from seeing what's happening around them rather than just looking at, say, a screen. That sort of problem, if I can call it that, or that issue. How do you see that perhaps playing out?
Sudanda, for the school system, digital education alone is not the answer.
Okay.
Digital education is an input, maybe 20%, 30% from class 8 onwards, and from class 1 to maybe class 8 or maybe class 7, maybe 10, 15%. That's all. See, please understand, children, we grow up as children. And how do we learn? From our peers, from our teachers, from our home, from seeing it for ourselves, from discovery, right? And that is a very slow process. It's a human action. We are not widgets. We are not robots. We are full of emotion, likes and dislikes and everything else. We be allowed to grow up. And many grow up at their own pace. Everybody doesn't grow up at the same pace. They grow up at a different pace. Some flower later, some flower earlier. So you can't standardize it and put it into a cookie cutter. So I don't think digital education is the panacea for young kids. You need human interaction. You need a teacher in school. You need more discovery. You need more play in school. You need to grow up. You need to experience that. You need a little bit of digital tools to understand that. But you must not spend too much time on digital tools. The danger of the digital world is you become a loner. You become an island. You lose your human interaction, your humanness. We are human because you and I can sit together, have a cup of coffee and have a conversation. And if you are not doing well or I'm not doing well, I can share with you and I can get empathy, right? We need this kind of thing. And that human relationship, what builds society, and that cannot be lost. So it's not the digital. Digital is a tool which can improve quality, give you better access, but human interaction and human change is required. For example, you go to a college, maybe 40% can be digital because you've grown up a bit, you understand everything, you need a teacher to answer the questions, and you need your peers to play around and to understand, to grow, to negotiate, right? But in schools, up to class 6, class 7, 10, 15% is okay. And beyond that, maybe 15, 20%. Let's be very clear. Digital education from class 1 is not the panacea, is not going to solve a problem. Physical education, a physical setting, schools, interaction, the school cohort, peers and teachers, all that is absolutely, absolutely necessary.
I just want to go back to the point that we're making on the government, the role of the government when it comes to education. One thing, of course, is the fact that in India, education has to be done as a not-for-profit, in a not-for-profit manner. But do you think that perhaps needs to change if we want to see more and faster innovation really coming into the system in India?
I want every child in this country to get good education.
Yeah.
And good education paid for by the government up to class 12, state and union government.
Okay.
Now, that is a guarantee government of India and the state government have to give to you under the constitution. I want the constitution to be amended to say up to class 12, every child will get education at public cost. That is what we have to give our children, and that should not be negotiable. Okay. Now, you as an individual should have a choice to use the government facility or go to a private sector facility. And if you say, I want to go to a private sector, not to a government school, it is a choice. You make the choice. Yeah. You should not be compelled, but you must make the choice. And for that, the government education system and the standards should be as good as the private sector with bare bones. You don't need a swimming pool in a school like maybe Delhi government is trying to boast and say, but you need good infrastructure, you need toilets, you need classroom, you need all the basic paraphernalia, which has to be given. Now, if I want to go to a private school, why should the government stop me? If I say I want to go to a private school, I'm willing to pay X amount of money, that is fine. Let them be private, let them be for profit, not for profit. Give me the choice. Give my parents the choice. Government should guarantee up to 12, we will give you free, good quality education. Beyond that, you want to do anything, fit it. Why are you suppressing something else? Because the reason is, if more private investment comes in, as society prospers, more and more people will go out of the public system, go to the private system. They're willing to pay, that is fine. But government should ensure high quality in the public system. Now, what happens? Government cannot ensure high quality in the public system because it's mismanaged, badly managed, not managed. So they try to suppress the private sector, say, you can't do this, you can't do this. Why? Oh, we can't give our kids, so you should not do it. I mean, this beggar than neighbor attitude. I don't understand that. So why should this old shibboleths remain for everybody? So I think this is the framework we should have for school education in future.
So I want to talk about the national education policy, sir, and a tweet that you had put out earlier last year saying that this is a truly transformative policy for New India. But this was, of course, the pandemic, it pretty much started at that point. So do you still hold that same view 1.5 years into the pandemic and the way things have really changed? Do you think that the national education policy is reflective of the changes which are required as of today?
We got 72 years of legacy as a free country in primary education. They're not going to change in 2 years. Finally, after 4 to 5 years, we got a new education policy. It's a wonderful vision, wonderful document, very liberal, very open. That's the nice thing. Vernacular, language education, our culture, our history, civilization, science, lowering the content, etc. Everything is there. Now it has to make to work. It'll take 10 to 15 years to see an impact, Sunanda. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Look at the numbers, Sunanda. There are 226 crore young children in school. And there are 1 crore teachers. You can't transform them by overnight. And if you go to college, there are 3.6 crore young people in college. 1 crore graduate every year. There are maybe 18, 20 lakh teachers. You're going to transform all of them. You can't do it. No country can do it. No country has done it. No country will be able to do it. It's going to take 10, 15 years. My view is schools can start doing it right now. For example, from class 1 to class 10, cut the curriculum by 30%. You can do it immediately. Much of it is unnecessary. And class 1 to class 6, have more play, more doing by hand, more interaction society, whatever that. You can do it immediately because there are no exams. You can do it, and each school can do it, and allow schools to experiment and to do it because a lot of it. And in college, you have to give the credit system. maybe the top 200 universities are geared to do it. They can do it immediately. They can start off from this year itself, so that in maybe 4 to 5 years, the higher education is changed and the impact will come later. Schools will take maybe 10 years to change, because you start from class 1, 2, 3, 4. For the class 1 to take, it'll take 10 years, class 4, another 6 years, etc.
Yeah.
But you got to start doing it. Big thing is, what do you do about government schools? In my view, there are only two sets of schools: good schools, bad schools. Whether government or private, we must encourage good schools. And the bad schools should be reformed, whether government or private. It's not that all private schools are good. That many private schools are bad. It's not that all government schools are bad. There are many good government schools. So we must go by good schools and bad schools by an open rating exercise, so we know where to invest, what has to be done. And that should be the criteria for schools and universities, not public, private, aided, and all that, which are artificial definitions.
So I want to take a step back and look at the big picture. For an entrepreneur who's watching today's interview with you, Mr. Pai, if you could do some forward gazing and say, these are perhaps the areas that you expect opportunities will open up for entrepreneurs who are looking at the education space, 2 or 3 things you want to tell them?
Yes, I think 2 or 3 things is very clear. Focus on the student. What does the student want? Understand the psychology of the student. Understand the global best practices in teaching. For example, we're just investing into a startup, Sunanda, which is following the Singapore model for education, because Singapore, among all countries in the world, has done a great degree of research as to how do children learn, what is good for children. Now, don't come from top down to say, this is what I think should happen. Look at it from the child's point of view, run a large test, talk to teachers and see what works well, how learnability can be enhanced. And once you're able to do that, design a program which is intuitive, easy to use, and where children can navigate, children can discover, and create that wow factor, so that the child gets curious to understand technology, start using technology, and learn on their own, and create content in the language they understand. Now, the way a 8-year-old child understands is very different from the way a 15-year-old young person understands. And maybe 18-year-old understands, right? We understand very differently. So you've got to go from their point of view and do it. That is, student first approach has to be done. Right now is a technology-led, high top-down approach, which I think there is a mismatch, because it doesn't work in all circumstances.
All right, that's all we could manage to pack into this part, but there's much more coming up. Do stay tuned for tonight. A wrap.